If you struggle with nerves or swinging freely on the ball, if you struggle with taking your practice level to the match court, this is the podcast episode for you. Jeff Greenwald is one of the premier sports psychologists in all the world, and he came on my podcast last year to discuss these topics. It was easily my most downloaded episode of 2024, so I hope you enjoy. All right, Jeff, welcome to the pod.
Great to be here, Jonathan. Thank you.
This is something, we'll get right to the good stuff right away. So whenever I have a sports psychologist, the mental side of the game, every player I've ever coached deals with nerves. And when I put up the Instagram questions, there were a lot of things. How do I play with nerves? How do I play looser? How do I handle it when I get tight? So I guess maybe to start off, I'm wondering if you can kind of, generally speaking, kind of describe why people get nervous when they're playing a recreational sport like tennis.
Because they're anxious that they're anxious. How about that?
It's pretty deep.
Let's kick it off right away, right? I mean, Novak talks, everybody gets nervous. So does he. There's no match he's ever played that he didn't feel nervous and all that. And we can talk a good game. Everybody can just talk about their nerves. But when you're out there, when you feel those feelings, the feet slow down and your arm gets a little bit rubbery, or you double faulted once and you're scared it's going to happen again, and the retreating and trying not to miss, and going into the future and worrying. So all of this anxiety of the anxiety is a big deal, because if you can cut that out, if players can really manage that and recognize, okay, accept it, and I mean radically accept it. Do you want to be nervous? No. Does it feel good? Not at all. But like you really do have to have a new perspective on the experience of the nerves, of course, how you interpret it. And that's a big deal too. So there's a lot we can talk about here today, I know.
Yeah, I'm gonna open that up to you. I'm gonna use a golf example for me. When I played my first tournament, I mean, I can't tell you how nervous I was. But my feedback from the nerves was, I went, oh, I stand closer to the ball when I'm nervous. Oh, I don't turn as much on my backswing when I'm nervous. And so the next time I played a tournament, of course, I was terrified again. And I went, oh, remember last time this is what happened? So I did the opposite. I stood farther from the ball. I tried to turn more than usual, and I hit a great drive, and I immediately relaxed. So is that something, kind of figuring out what those nerves do to you? Is that a good way to handle that?
I think that awareness is huge. And I love how you said you did the opposite. So, that's really a great approach, because we do get conditioned into doing the same thing over and over. We back off. Usually that's the thing that players do, is get tentative. They try not to miss because they don't feel good. They don't feel like they're going to make it. I get it. But we have to stop avoiding that moment, and we have to release the ball. Because the more we do it, the more we back off, the safer we play, try not to miss, we reinforce the fear, and we stay in this vicious cycle. But as soon as you are sort of coaching your brain, if you will, your brain's going, oh my God, oh no, don't miss. And you're like, yeah, no, I'm about something else here. I'm about releasing. I'm about playing for mastery. I'm in the driver's seat, not you, fear. Then you start to really make massive progress. I call it the upward spiral, after that, because you've really sort of taken control of what you have control over. Right. So, yeah.
So one thing I coach is, people can't hit more winners on purpose. Like if they could, Novak he'd be hitting more than 20% winners in a match. Like objectively, he just would. It's an easier way to win, but you can't force winners. And so a great way to improve, in my opinion, is you start reducing all the unforced errors you can make. You reduce double faults, you make more returns, you get more balls over the net, stop missing wide. And for me, I have no problem thinking of those things in a positive light. Like I'm going to hit higher over the net. I'm going to hit more middle. A lot of people, when I hear you talking about that tentative mindset, they get scared. They go, oh, I'm trying not to miss, and they decelerate. Is there a healthier way to communicate that or experience those thoughts?
Yeah. So what you're describing is the ability and willingness to focus on something else other than yourself. What happens is when we get anxious, when we get tight, our focus goes inward, and we are now extremely self-conscious and protecting. We have to do, as you were indicating earlier, the opposite. We have to get our attention onto tactic, We got to get it onto the target and commit to something that matters to you. So what I realized is that when I'm as committed to releasing the ball, being loose, being aggressive, moving the ball around, when I'm committed to that, regardless of the outcome, that is an incredibly different place to be. And but the bottom line is you got to get your focus off yourself, because you find yourself in the web, in your own internal web, and you got to get your focus outside of yourself.
What would be the first step? So let's say a recreational player is out there, it's 5-all in the first set, and we're not necessarily the thinker of our own thoughts, but it hits them like a ton of bricks and they go, man, I am tight. What is step one to handling that situation?
So if you've practiced the deep breathing, deep diaphragmatic breathing, like if the room was hot, helps cool the room, right? So if you really know how to breathe properly, breathing in through your nose, exhaling out through your mouth, Novak is the master, and you train that, even a minute a day. But if you actually do it properly, breathing in, you could be a 4 count in, 1 second hold, 6 out. Everybody has different versions. It could be 4 and 4, but the slower the exhale, the better, because that kicks in this parasympathetic nervous system, relaxes the body. So you that one deep breath, if you've done it a bit through the day, a couple times, and you do it properly, that breath is going to take you down from, call it a 10 tight or an 8. It's going to drop you down, a peg or two. Right. So that's just a reset breath. It's not going to get rid of the nerves. People often think, it didn't work. It's not going to get rid of them, but it's going to put you in the driver's seat. It's going to reset you. And now you've got a pivot point to refocus on something. So what do? You focus on the ball. You focus on your target. So you pick one thing to come back to. And it's the coming back that's so key. If we're lost in the nerves, and I know it can really hijack us. It absolutely does. We have to pick something to refocus onto.
Interesting. Yeah, it's just such a difficult thing, and everyone has their own little outcome or outside force that kind of drives the nerves, and that's why I guess it's probably interesting for you as a sports psychologist, because it's not the same exact thing every time. But how do expectations, either self expectations or external expectations, kind of affect nerves? How do you see that working together?
Well, the expectations are probably, I'd almost put it at the number one, slot in terms of the mistake players are making relative to their nerves. So there's a, you're going to win or lose. It's pretty in tennis, right? There's no ties. So we know at the end of 2 hours ish, there's going to be a winner or a loser. And that uncertainty, because the brain does not like uncertainty, so it's going to try to predict what's going to happen. What are my chances today? They're a 7 UTR. I'm a 6.5, or the whole UTR sort of negotiation, the terrorist negotiation. So, that is where we also come up with the shoulds. I should win. I call it a 6-letter swear word, because it is such a, there's nothing good that comes out of it, but the brain churns that out. I mean, think about, you should beat him, or I should, so if you win, you get nothing out of that, sort of from that standpoint. And then you just put all the pressure on yourself if you don't meet those expectations. So the expectations you really want to have are about your commitment to really releasing through the ball. How loose were you? How intense were you? How focused were you? Did you, on break point for the third time, were you really willing to play with controlled aggression? What are you committed to? And that's really what you want to base your expectations on, rather than, am I going to beat this guy and what are people going to say, of course, after.
It's funny. I'm curious what you think about this, but I had a guy at Duke, and he had some anger issues, and he was losing to guys, but they were basically the same level. And so every metric wise, every UTR results, same spot in the lineups. And I said, okay, let's just say you guys are exactly the same level, and you play 10 times. How many times do you think you'll win? And he said 6 or 7. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because that sounds like you're better than that guy then. Like he had this expectation that even though on paper he knew he's about the same, he expected to win essentially probably deep down almost every time. And so when he was losing, it was like, what is going on here? And
Right.
that led to that frustration.
And the interesting thing, Jonathan, about that sort of mindset, whether it's, inflating your own level or just not paying attention to the stats, which I'd like to talk about in a moment, but like, you know, the pros, when you hear them talking, of course, when they go on the court, they just want to get done with the interview, right? That when they're through the tunnel, they're like, okay, let me just go play. But whether before or after, there's the best in the world don't talk about winning and losing as much as the people who are struggling with nerves, et cetera, and confidence. There's a inherent understanding among athletes who've played and succeeded that it is about mastery. And the truth is, it is about mastery for everybody. But there's this outcome problem that, because of course you want to win, and losing is painful, and it's more painful than losing or winning is enjoyable, right? The pain of losing, right? It hurts. And we could get into that all day long about self-worth, being attached to the outcome. But I just think that the more players focus in on the mastery, on the expectations of what they have control over, obviously, how loose they are, the intensity, the focus, how they carry themselves, moving on from the last point. These are things that if you get really engaged with these factors, of course, the great irony is it leads to more winning anyway.
I've heard, so I would say I have high standards for myself and for my players. I expect you to have great effort. I expect you to have a good attitude. But in the last year or two as a coach, I've kind of adopted zero expectations. Like if a parent says, what do you think for the match? I always go, I have no idea. Like, well, guess what? We're going to find out in 2 hours, but I have no idea what's going to happen. They had a great practice. Great practices don't always lead to great matches, and poor practices don't lead to poor matches. So I've gotten to the point now where I have zero expectations. Is that a bad thing? Am I going too far overboard on that?
I ask players, let's look at it this way, Jonathan. Let's say you could know for the rest of your life you're going to win. You go, here's a tournament coming up. You're going to lose 5 in the third, 7-5 in the third set in the semifinals. You'll beat the guy in the quarters 7-6, 6-4, and you knew that ahead of time. How excited are you to go play that tournament?
Yeah, not very.
Yeah, I mean, like I think misinterpret the nerves. It's exciting. I mean, to not know, the brain doesn't like it at first blush, like, oh, well, what's going to happen? I get it. But that's also the excitement of it. And if people could just be more willing to endure the not knowing, tolerate it, and go out and really focus on these specific intentions, as I call them, before you actually walk on the court. What are your 2 intentions? So you can come back to them. It's a different dimension of that you're playing from. It's a different dimension, and literally, it's like you're embodying a different space. You're not feeling the pressure like the same way. You feel pressure still, but you're embracing it, and you're focused more narrowly on what's going to help you play better. You're not hijacked and pulled in and out of the past and the future. It's a completely different place.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned stats that you wanted to get into. I want to make sure you give me those because I'm interested in that.
Well, sure. Yeah. And let me go back. You said about expectations, is it too much? I mean, we can obviously go overboard with everything. Somebody listening could be like, oh, the mastery process outcome debate, right? It's all about process. And I'm not saying, I just want to be clear. No, it's about outcome too. And it's about how are you showing up for all in the first set? You got some nerves, and, are you backing off, or are you stepping in and hitting the ball? So it gets very binary very fast in this conversation, right? But outcome is, to get into tournaments, you need the rankings and the ratings and the whole thing. Okay, great. That makes this exciting and challenging and painful. Now let's go focus on what matters. It's going to help you play better. Okay, so coming back to the stats. I mean, I swear to you, if somebody told me when I was 15 years old, Jeff, and I was a perfectionist, I wanted to win every point. Yeah, I'm very competitive at Bollettieri's, duking it out on the back courts there, and that was like playing a tournament every day, actually. But if someone said to me, "You're going to lose, Jeff, 45% of the points in every match you play, playing anybody around your level, minimum, and you can lose up to 50% and still win." And by the way, 45%, if you win 55, you're crushing them. 2 sets, 6-3, 3-3, 3-4, probably. I would have been like, what are you talking about? They might have had to say, here's the pizza, and cut out this. But I mean, so when I was 15 or so, actually I was 16, and I was at Bollettieri's, and I'm playing this guy in the finals, Chris Lapriori, good player from New England. I was from New England, and I'm 6'4", 6'3", I think he got me, but I would miss a shot, and I would just get so upset, so angry, scream. And they actually said, you can't play in this Florida Tennis Association anymore. They kicked me out it was a week. Aaron Krickstein's sister, who was down there, said, Jeff, don't worry, we'll get, you got to write a letter though. You got to write a letter and say you're sorry and you're going to fix it. And I did, and they let me play. I said, I'm sorry, I take responsibility, and I got better. I was very competitive. I wanted to win. I hated missing the easy rally ball. And, but if someone said, I had no idea that I could lose that amount of points. Now, it's intellectual, I get it, but I think I would have absorbed that. And when I missed, you only lose 1 point for that. I would have thrown it in the 45, 50% bucket. And why put it in the 7% bucket you're fighting for? And Craig O'Shaughnessy, who we did a course together called Getting Tight, actually. And he's been fantastic with helping, players figure out how to think better about their practices and matches relative to the stats, of course.
I want to make sure. So if I got this wrong, I'm giving you credit for it. I'm pretty sure in that course, Getting Tight, you had the idea of permission slips.
Yes.
And I have loved that one forever because for me, I'm about as robotic as it gets as a motion, human being. And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, have I ever played a match where I haven't missed 15 to 24 hands? Like, of course, right. I do it every time. I'm going to try to make every one. Yeah. But I know, just based on the history of the tennis world, everybody does that. So why would I get mad when I've missed my 5th forehand? Can you kind of explain that permission slip idea?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I know how that feels, of course, right? When you might feel a little nerves, or you go for something, you're kind of debating whether you should, but you do, and you miss. And it's super tempting on the next point to hold back, right? You don't want to give another free point away. It's kind of feels like a sin, doesn't it? To give another free point. They're just, serve, you miss. But what I have found is that if you can, again, tolerate that moment and not let your brain direct traffic, so to speak. If you can let your brain, okay, time to, buckle up here and just get the ball back and step in again and commit. Maybe you need a little more top, you got to go to the big target, not go as close to the line. Sure. Great. Go have a little shape on the ball, but you're releasing the ball. You're not holding back, and you're really willing. And that's really the operative word here, is you're willing. So the permission slip is you're really giving yourself that permission, because you're going to be paid back dividends if you can stay the course there. You find that you get past that rough patch of like, make it, miss, should I, and all that tug of war that's going on inside. It really cuts that stuff out, and it becomes a lot cleaner, and you can be more decisive with this whole thing. So yeah, the permission slips are huge. Permission to miss, as I call it in my book, I think has been a big, helpful concept for people.
So alongside with nerves, and it's probably a big reason for this, but a lot of players also say they play so much better in practice. Oh, I was hitting great, but then I'm not playing matches at the same level. What are your thoughts on that? Are nerves the main reason for that level drop?
So 2 things on that, well, a few, but one is I don't think in particular younger players, arguably even good league, competitive league, senior players, but I think it gets better in terms of their intensity in practice. I think the intensity of practice, the quality of practice is important. I think kids, and I see it all over, the sort of this a little lackadaisical, little unfocused, certainly the intensity is too low. And the experience when you play a tournament match or you go into a tournament is so radically different. You've been kind of mailing in, okay, if you want to beat a guy in practice and you're in a breaker, you want to win, and that bragging rights or whatever it is, there you go, that can up it. But if you've been in clinics and you really haven't been playing enough sets, for example, which I think is probably another issue. But I think the disparity in that feeling is too wide. And so that we got to close that gap. One being players need to be more intense, visualizing themselves, on the court in the tournament coming up. For example, before I play the men's 40 nationals still, and played 17 years now, I'm 57, but I still love going down. I was in the quarters this year, still was able to hang in there a little bit, but I'll visualize myself on that front court. I'll visualize in my mind before a return, a week before, hitting a backhand down the line, or picturing people there watching, and I'll recreate the experience in my mind a little bit just to add some reality to it. So when I'm actually there, it's not feeling so foreign. And
my best year as a junior was my second year, 18. Mm-hmm. And my coach, Billy Stearns, it was the most I improved in a year. It was phenomenal. And if I was in practice playing a point, and let's say I missed a backhand wide, immediate 2-court suicide. and number one, like, I'm tired, so I don't want to do that. And I felt this pressure and this intensity. And I used to love going to tournaments because I was like, if I miss, it's just a point. Oh my God, this is great. I get to relax for 25 seconds. And so I felt so free. Mm-hmm. And I was in good shape. Like, it was almost less of a punishment. It didn't stop me from being disciplined, but I almost felt more relaxed in a tournament than I did in a practice.
I love that. That's amazing. And so did you feel like in the tournaments you thrived? You felt competitive and you didn't get as hijacked maybe by the nerves that you could have been?
Yeah, I felt excited. I obviously felt like I was in great shape because I had done a lot of running in practice. But at the end of the day, I was like, man, in practice, I lose, plus running, right, plus maybe he screams at me, plus all this. And then I go in a match. I just lost a point. And as long as it wasn't match point, I'm good to go. Exactly. And I wanted to keep winning so that I didn't have to go back and practice. So it wasn't like my competitive drive wasn't strong. I just felt great, and in a way felt more relaxed than when I was maybe 12 or 14, which was I would go to a tournament and I couldn't eat. I was so nervous for these things.
Right. No, that's a great point. Great example. And I think, Jonathan, that again, coming back, and I think so important, it's easier said than done, of course, but when players are going into tournaments and they feel the nerves, they feel and their dad, mom's driving them, or you're driving yourself to the courts and you want to beat this player, and people know you're playing that player, and they're going to say, oh, how'd you lose to them? Or, I said the first question you typically get is what, when you get off the court, how'd you do? Did you win? Right. I mean, we've been conditioned, brainwashed for years. So that's what the first thought is, oh, this is big. I need to come off the court, be able to say, oh, I won, kind of deal. But I think this interpretation of the feeling is important. It's really important. Like it's normal. It'll gradually go away. You have your intentions. You're excited to play. You're excited to compete. You got the adrenaline, absolutely. But you're not going to have that energy be all stopped up in you because you're scared to miss and going to hold back and hope to win and all this stuff. It's a terrible, terrible downward spiral. So it's normal. I'm excited to play. I'm going to focus and prioritize my intentions going in. So you reroute your brain when it starts to veer into, oh no, and these nerves, and I hate this feeling, and you're just not in the driver's seat, and that's what players need to fix.
I had a coach explain to me. He said to the group of kids, he said, "Would you be happy if you won 0-0 in your next tournament match?" And they said, "Yeah, I'd be happy." And he was like, "Oh, well, that's awesome. You know what I can do?" We were practicing next to the 5-year-old clinic. He's like, I'll draw them up first round. You'll beat them 0-0." And everyone was like, "Well, I don't want to do that. That's boring." And so he was like, "Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So deep down, you kind of like the struggle, number one. And number two, if you want to play someone your level, what are the odds you're actually going to beat that person 0-0 if you're actually supposed to be competitive?" So he was kind of reframing it like, even though you kind of don't want it to be a challenging match, deep down, you kind of do.
Right. Exactly. And I think deep down, as we were talking earlier, you said, oh, we're starting out deep on the beginning, anxiety of the anxiety, right? Which it is. People don't think of that part, but that's the layer where I'm saying, let's remove that. Let's deal with the feeling. Okay. But not the feeling of the feeling. I mean, we get, right?
Yeah.
Anxiety. Um, so yeah, I just think that the way we interpret this stuff and is crucial. And being loose, by the way, is something you can bake into your game. So this is the other thing. So players typically, the classic is you tell yourself to relax, go for your shots, and then usually players do the opposite. So why do you have to command yourself to do something that normally you do in practice anyway, mostly? Now you're telling yourself to do the thing you're already supposed to be doing. Yeah. So it's just a kind of and of course, Tim Galway in the Inner Game of Tennis captured this sort of voice of this command and control voice. But being loose is not a thought. It's a feeling at the end of the day. And it's happening on contact, period. When you're loose, your hand and your shoulder are releasing that ball or it's not. And you can be somewhere on the dial. I use a dial 1 to 10. 10 is as tight as you've ever played, and 1 you'd never want to play at a 1, right? But I found that about a 4 or 5, your grip a little bit loose, shoulder, you're not bracing on contact. You're letting that wrist go through the contact. That getting familiar with that feeling as you're hitting it, you're not judging it and like, oh no, you're just noticing. You're aware of the feeling of loose. And you can bake it into your game day after day. 10 minutes, loose, and then go up. I have people go up the dial tighter and tighter, and then dropping the tension. So they're intentionally getting tight, hitting the ball. Okay, I'll take them 6. Okay, show me a 7. Show me an 8. And then I'll take them back down the dial. 6, show me 6. Give me a 4. Give me a 2. And then I bring them up. I say, well, how was that? And I go, oh, it was different. And I'll say, how did you get rid of that tension? I just did it. I just let it go. Did you tell yourself? No, you just let it drop. And then that feeling becomes more associated with your swing and it becomes more the norm, and you can kind of calibrate better in matches. So again, it's a feeling, it's a physical feeling as opposed to a thought about being loose.
I'm going to have a hard time articulating this question, but when players tell me, "Oh, I can't stop hitting in the net," my inner voice immediately is like, aim higher, dude. Like, you're not going to miss a lob in the net, right? Or I keep missing wide, or, whatever. My hand is too tight. And for me, I'm like, oh, then loosen up your hand. But in the match, when they feel those nerves, like, why is that harder? No, you don't really need to command yourself, but it's really not that difficult of a fix, right? Like, if you couldn't get the ball over the net and you said, well, are you capable of physically hitting 5 feet higher over the net? The answer is obviously yes. And yet they will stay in the net and bury balls. What is the thought or the skill or the mantra that can get someone into the present where they can solve this problem that deep down they easily know they should be able to solve?
It's a great question. Great anecdote. I mean, in that moment, they are caught in the problem, right? I'm hitting so many balls to the net. And that's what they're caught in. And so that's what they're getting more of, what they don't want. They're not willing to shift gears yet. They're not willing. They don't even, it's sort of the, I don't know what I don't know place. And they're just reacting, right? And that's what happens when we get anxious and caught up in the outcome and what people will say. It's sort of this chronic tension, stress. And so it's the awareness that helps gets you on the bus. It doesn't get you to your destination, the awareness, but you got to realize, okay, this is how I'm feeling. This is what's happening. Be willing to adjust that, right? Make an adjustment. And the reason to your question, why players don't just do it, is because at anything lower than the top 100 in the world, arguably top 200, but pretty quickly, even the top 200, you're winning points when you play safe. You feel little nerves, and you miss one free point and you roll it back. You start playing conservative and safe, and your opponent might, certainly sometimes, step up and get trigger happy and miss. And you win matches. Players win matches, not to mention 12 and under, 14s. You're winning lots of matches, and you played safe 70% of the time. And you won, a fair amount of matches. This intermittent reinforcement, playing safe and winning, it's like that tug of war. It's like, maybe tomorrow I'll do that. I'm going to get this ball back, man. I just want to win this one, and then I'll start tomorrow, kind of thing, And so I think that intermittent reinforcement is an absolutely brutal place where players are getting stuck because they are being reinforced for playing safe. And that's why I've just been passionate about this for so many years, because I just feel like at the end of the day, we want that feeling of being free, of being loose, releasing the ball. And of course, it leads to better outcomes anyway.
I had a ton of success, especially like in the 14s. I was always a top 10 player in the country, but I would go through 14-year-old tournaments. I remember one time in the finals, I was up 6-0, 4-0, and the guy held serve, and I beat him 6-0, 6-1. And when I reported the score, the tournament director, he had a bag of bagels, and he said, "Oh, what was your score?" And I said 6-0, 6-1. And he took one bagel out of the bag, and he gave me 9 bagels because that was the first game I had lost in the tournament. But if you would, like, looking back on it, I played super tight and super conservative, and I was definitely the best player in the tournament, but I wasn't playing free. And for me, I don't know if you've had this with your players, but it was almost like someone flipping a light switch. It was probably my first year 18s, and I just got tired of being nervous.
Exactly.
And I was like, it's so much easier to just go play. And I actually enjoy my 2 hours out there. And I still, by the way, I play better when I'm loose. So it's like there's no downside. But maybe it was more of a gradual change, but it felt like a flip of the switch where I just went, this is stupid and exhausting. I'll just go play and see what happens. And it was like I never went back after that. Do you see players experiencing that?
100%. And that's another great example, because until we get sick of something enough, human behavior gets entrenched, and we all know it's hard. And these questions coming in on Instagram, I completely understand, because we get caught in this cycle, and when you get tired of it, you get tired of playing that way, of playing safe, and the feeling of it. And then, the outcome of it, sometimes it works out, but the feeling of it, and knowing in your heart that you're not playing the way you can, you're not playing on your terms. I think there comes a point, I hope there comes a point in time for everybody that they say, I'm sick of this. I really want the feeling of releasing the ball, and I'm not going to let my nerves control me. I'm not going to let that dictate my choices. You said I'm sick of being nervous. Like, that's one part. And the other is I'm sick of playing safe when I get nervous, right? And that's something we have control over 100%. We get nervous subconsciously, we care a lot. We want to win, it's going to happen. We're going to, even when you're after mastery and whatever, and you have your intentions, you're still going to find yourself at different matches and situations a little bit nervous. But you can hold on to doing a percentage better releasing on the ball, because you're sick of the way it used to be, and you're not that person anymore. And you shift your identity. My identity changed as a player after I started to do this. And I mean, then years I played the tour. I came off and I was 24 years old, and I go back at 35, and I'm playing, and I was 795 in the world ATP, and now I'm playing Scott Draper, who was 50 in the world the year before. He had 4 match points on Federer like 3 months after I played him, and I'm up 5-3 in the third on him. And so I'm coming back 12 years later, and off the street, literally, like pre-qualifying in the qualies, and the guy, Scott Draper, said to me after the match, he said, "So is sports psychology part-time or is tennis part-time?" Like, what the hell, But it does make a big difference when you play from this place, for sure.
Quick question: Are you like a hard out at 7 o'clock, or
Um,
what is that, 4 o'clock your time?
4, it's pretty hard out at 4. Yeah.
Okay, because I have like 9. I'm a pick and choose the ones I like in order. Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up with Instagram questions. First one, which is a huge one. This person wanted to know, how do you build confidence and believe in yourself?
You build confidence by having unconditional confidence, because when confidence is based on just outcomes, which it typically is, you beat that player and you played well and beat them, and of course you get confidence when you beat somebody better. So that's a given. And if you played well, you're going to get more confident. But the confidence that we have control over is you can make adjustments. You know that you can release on the ball, as we're talking about, even when you're a little nervous, that you can refocus. If your focus isn't great, you can refocus on the task at hand and raise your intensity, because you're aware that your intensity is too low, and you start moving your feet. So being able to adjust and control these things gives you a great deal of confidence, because it's not subject to just, did you win or lose, and did you play well this day or not. So that's where you want to put your attention on all the things we're talking about here today, and really train some of this stuff, practice it. Yeah.
How do you prevent exploding when errors and mistakes start piling up consecutively?
So I think that, sometimes it's funny. Some people see me compete. I'm pretty intense out there. And then occasionally I'll let out and they'll be like, he's a sports psychologist, it's like, and laugh. But I believe it's totally fine to emote, to let it out. God, fine. But you don't want it to contaminate the next point. So you have to have that perspective that it's okay to every now and then, you're human. You're going to let it out, let the steam out a little bit. But it's just really important to come back to the present, and that one mistake, the 2 mistakes, the 3, 45, 50% you're going to lose anyway. Remember? So, it's very instinctive to have an easy miss too, right? It's a sitter volley, you miss, and it seems like it's worth a game. It's 1 point, and the faster you can move on, the better your chances of playing well and winning. So if you're competitive, if you're truly competitive, and if you really want to win, then you got to win this inner game in that moment of not getting angry and letting your brain drive the car and hijack you. You've got to be more defiant, more stubborn, and not relent to what your opponent. And most people are victims of their own situation, own chemistry, and so if you're competitive, maybe reframe that and mean you're going to stay calm throughout that entire match, and focus on what you have control over, and that's and that'll help you stay more composed through the match.
We spoke pre-show about how difficult it is. If you're not an expert, then how do you know you're getting good advice? So I'm going to tell you something I heard from golf, a sports psychology tip, and I want you to tell me if this applies to tennis or if you agree with the concept. But the person said that being surprised in a match or a golf round, being shocked, like you said, miss a high volley. That's what made me think of it. So if I missed a 6-inch putt, or if you missed an overhead on top of the net, and that is super surprising, that engages high frequency in your brain and sets you on this path of control. And so the idea the person was talking about was, are you supposed to make 100% of easy volleys? No. So if you do miss one and you're not surprised, you stay in low frequency, you can handle it a little better. Is that concept I'm not an expert, so I want your take on that because I found that super helpful for me.
No, it's super because if you're reacting to think overreacting, getting overly emotional is pulling you out of the bubble. It's pulling you out of your own flow and zone, right? So brain frequency beta is that chatter, and you're more likely to go into beta there as opposed to alpha or theta, right? Theta is like sleeping, but you want to be in this sort of alpha and a little bit of theta in there. It's okay. Like that lower frequency. And when we emote, when we get overly reactive, double faulting is a great example. One double fault, two double, people freak out. I can't tell you how many people have called me for the yips on their serve. It's in the last 3 years, the yips, amazing, like a huge uptick on it. And I don't know exactly why, but people, maybe the pandemic got people more introspective and so forth. But you don't want to be too surprised. It's going to pull you out of your flow, and you want to have more equanimity, more evenness emotionally throughout the match.
This person must know your work. I'm not familiar with this question, but they said, can you explain the sweep effect and why it's effective against opponents?
That's so funny. I wonder who that is. That's so funny. I told my son, I was kind of sometimes I think I've been doing this a long time. I'm like, well, what are some of my favorite nuggets? And, and maybe some of them are like you get them early in your life and they help, right? My son, I'm driving. I'm like, buddy, you want to hear one of my favorites? Yeah. And he's like, fine, whatever. Sweep the guy, just sweep him around, like a broom, and he's like, that's it. That's one of your favorites. So, he's like laughing, but it kind of came. It's funny. It came at the time. Aaron Crickstein. I don't know if you'd seen him play much, but good player. He was at Bolletari's, and I loved his game, particularly his backhand. He would just sweep guys left and right, and I was feeling anxious a lot before matches, so I tried to simplify. It was sort of intuitively helping me to simplify how I wanted to play. Now we could call it controlled aggression, move the guy around, build the point. So sweeping people is like, I notice a lot of people hit down the middle, neutral balls. They don't need to. Sometimes it's good to do, cut the angle off, but sweeping guys around means, or players around is moving them, getting them out of the center, putting them on defense and really kind of controlling points, dictating a little bit more. Yeah.
I've experienced this one for sure. This person wanted to know, why do they play better when they watch good players play after they've watched good players play?
Something called mirror neurons. When we watch people, we internalize what they're doing. So it's sort of a naturally built in for empathy, to be empathetic. And I wish more people were empathetic, but, empathy happens because we're mirroring, and it helps us tune in. So when we're watching high level, tennis, for example, there's that effect that can be happening. So I have huge mirror neurons. I actually, my shall say ex-wife. My ex-wife now, I'd be ordering and I would pick up the accent of the person who was asking for the order, and I would speak to her in that dialect because because I'm naturally tuned into people, and it just is something I do now, and it's a good thing, but it can also, depending on who you surround yourself with, maybe not be such a great thing. So, yeah.
This player struggles to stay focused for all 3 sets. What is your best advice or skill for staying mentally locked in for that full 2 hours and 3 sets?
So obviously for 3 hours, it's a long time. Focus is going to go in and out, normal. You want to catch your focus as early as you can and refocus. And on changeovers, really try to go blank and, got the towel, use your towel, feel the towel, look up at a tree if you're outside or wherever you are, look up at the air condition inside, whatever. But get your mind on something neutral. You don't need to be thinking a lot unless you need to make an adjustment. You can, you're down 4-1, playing pretty well. You need to adjust your tactic probably. So you want to ask yourself what's going on here. It's usually probably playing too safe or going for too much or going to their strength maybe. But um, you know, I think that you players need to kind of recover better and go neutral on changeovers, and also between points is huge. You really need a routine between points, breathing, and I have routines that I teach people. So anybody who wants to come to my website can get this, fearlesstennis.com. Sign up for my newsletter. They'll get a bunch of free stuff soon coming up too. And but yeah, players need a routine after the points that becomes automatic, and that'll help immensely with focus.
You mentioned Timothy Galway and kind of being in the flow. This person wanted to know how you can access that self one person versus the self two person more often.
Well, so my understanding is the self
Or
two is yeah,
the
other way.
reverse. They had a reverse, but yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a great question, and Tim was on it early with this idea, which is, of course, extremely challenging, which is to sort of detangle yourself from your thoughts and not. There's this. So the one of the biggest challenges we have is that to get through the day every day, we have to use our brain to solve problems, to fix, to anticipate. So our brain is a huge strength, but it also in tennis and sports can become a really big weakness because we don't need to think the way we do off the court. It's a very different process. You want to have more visuals. You want to have it be simple, one word. So all of that chatter, all of those instructions, the self one saying, don't do this and don't miss, and it's 43rd the score, the whole negotiation with the score. You have to practice recognizing, being aware that you're having thoughts during the day. Tune in, notice it, and refocus. I have a technique I have people drop into their feet, just dropping their attention down, centering, or dropping into their feet. You can't be focused on two things at once. So if you drop your attention into your body, which we know is mindfulness, you're more present, you're not thinking, and you're letting your body do it. So if you're willing to let your mind get out of the way, you can start releasing with self too.
You wrote the book Best Tennis of Your Life, and this person wanted to know how they could play their best tennis and relax in tiebreakers.
So tiebreakers are an interesting animal, and we tend, of course, to get even more hyper-focused on the outcome. And that we've built, think about it, we've spent all this time, and now it's just the weight of it, right? Of course. So there's more pressure, and we have to just, I think, work a little bit harder to play one point at a time, to come back to those intentions, to be really clear about, if being consistent, got you to that tiebreaker. You want to stick with what worked to get you there. You don't want to. People tend to panic a little bit, think they have to do more than they did before. As the finish line is now in front of both players, whoever reacts a little bit more calmly to that typically will do a little better. And I think that's where focus comes in. You got to really drop in, focus on the ball, use your breath, have your routine. So that's why the routines and such are important. So you can come back to something you have confidence in. But I think, matches are won a lot by being solid and not giving away points, building the point. I think there's a lot of value and calmness that can come with the idea of building the point. You don't need to win it in one or two. Obviously, at the highest level, you kind of do need to win it in two, usually, first strike. But you really, patience is important, and recognize the tendency to get swept into the score pressure and just playing one point at a time, sticking to those intentions in the tiebreaker.
I need you to help me as a coach here because Bill Belichick had a quote, and I love it. He said something along the lines of, before you learn how to win, you need to learn how to not lose. And he's like, they won all these football games in New England because they weren't fumbling and they weren't jumping off sides and they knew the rules. And he's like, that was more important to him than how do I make the amazing catch or this amazing play. Let's just get rid of all the stuff that loses. But as a coach, I've found, like I said, that people view that in a negative term. And then they're really scared. Oh my God, I just did this thing that I'm trying not to do, as if there's a way to eliminate it completely. Like, what are your thoughts on communicating that concept? And do you like that concept?
Yeah, I mean, I see his point. And if you're, in every level of the game, you'll see that if you watch challenger players, 200, 250 in the world, and then you watch top 50 in the world, certainly top 10, you see fewer errors, and they're more solid in the big moments. And being consistent statistically still wins a lot of matches. And so cleaning that up so you can then build those weapons and feel good about those weapons. You need that safety net. You need that base, that foundation, that solid, consistent. Brad Gilbert destroyed people, right? With his competitiveness, his consistency, his intelligence. Not everybody can think the way he thinks per se, and be analytical like that. But I think that you do want to clean that up and have that foundation. I want to make the point too, while we're here, that there's a difference in all that we've been discussing. There's a difference between being consistent and solid and playing safe and scared to miss. I want to make that distinction.
For sure. And this is the hardest question, so buckle up. You only get one, no cheating. What is your single best advice for the 4-0 player? Actually, if you want to give me two, we have time for two. if you have to.
So the first would be that 4 and that O, that 4.0. See if you can transcend that for 2 hours or the night before. And can you actually orient to the game itself, to the experience itself, focus on what matters to you, what you've been practicing, what you have confidence in with your patterns, playing on more on your terms, be clear about that, and try to move past the 4.0, 4.2, 4.5, 3.823. These numbers will become irrelevant one day, but I mean, it's wonderful to have goals, but the putting people on a pedestal because they beat a 4 point, a good 4.0 versus a medium 4.0, like the ratings and the rankings and the score are obvious obstacles that you need to really put to the side and come back to your index card with your two intentions of how do you want to play today? What's important to you in addition to getting the W and trying not to get the L? Like, let's get past that. And then the second piece of advice would be that when you miss, it's okay. And you don't need to analyze it. You don't need to analyze every time you miss. I mean, walk away from it. Walk away from the train. What you think's a train wreck is a little bump in the, is nothing. It's nothing. It's nothing. If every pilot, when they hit a little pocket of turbulence, freaked out, and that plane, I don't know if they keep it up as much as they do, but just try to be more even keeled emotionally. So you're not going in your head upstairs in the attic trying to solve for everything when you miss a forehand, and half of them are probably good misses anyway. And your best tennis lies just beyond that forehand that you would have just analyzed the crap out of. Your best tennis is right behind that if you allow it.